The girl with the curtained head ignored her and walked to her young man in royal clothes. She looked over the young man's shoulder and looked at the tall old man who followed suit. She looked depressed and said, "Just now, if you don't agree, you'll kill, although you have your reasons." "I don't think it's right." The young man in royal clothes stopped his body 7 or 8 steps away from the cold girl and said sincerely in his eyes, "My name is Gaozhen. I'm from Jian County in the Xi dynasty. But if Grandpa will offend me, I'm willing to apologize and compensate the girl." The tall old man stood behind the young man in royal clothes. In a complicated mood, the so-called Gao's children in Jian County of the Great Xi dynasty are actually just an implicit statement that in the 1200 years since the founding of the Xi dynasty, the people who sat on the dragon chairs were all surnamed Gao. The Emperor Taisu was launching in Jian County. The girl was indifferent to this. She raised her hands and tied the bandage tightly. She said to the old man, "If I were outside, I would not be an opponent in the face of a martial arts master who is likely to have traveled far against the wind. But at this moment, as long as I borrow the flying sword, you will die." The tall old man sneered. "As long as the assassin knows your mace in advance, and with his great physique, you can pierce 10 swords as long as you protect the key points. What's more, I'm 2 levels higher than him, and one of the thresholds is regarded as a natural mode of martial arts." The little girl, "I don't know where you come from, so I can say the word no doubt of death." The girl frowned and quietly held the handle of the knife with one hand. "I'm afraid of trouble and hate to quarrel with people. Otherwise, let's try to see whether it's true or false. Who wins? Who makes sense? How about it?" The old man, who had little chance of being threatened, was annoyed. If she wasn't in this strange place where God hates ghosts and hates ghosts, the cultivation of a girl like this, no matter how gifted she is, the old man can crush and kill 10 with one hand out to take a step back, if it's not for the heavy responsibility and the need to take care of the young highness who was highly expected by the whole country of the Xi dynasty. Even if the old man is crushed and seriously injured by the road of self-circulation here, he should also give a good lesson to the girl who doesn't know the greatness of heaven, and if the newborn calf is not afraid of the tiger and has commendable courage, that's all. It doesn't mean that the tiger won't eat the calf completely. The young man in royal clothes, who claimed to be Gaozhen, quickly rounded up the scene and said, "If the girl must be investigator, I'm willing to take this thing as a remedy." Gaozhen lowered his head, opened the cloth bag around his waist, took out the jade seal, held it in one hand and handed it to the girl with the curtained head in the distance, to show sincerity. Just as the girl knew to investigate Grandpa Wu's unintentional offense. After all, he is out of loyalty and no harm. The tall old eunuch with white eyebrows and hair was suddenly frightened. He knelt on one knee and said in panic, "Your Highness, you can't." How salty the old slave is. "This square jade seal is your Highness's chance. It is a rare pure treasure in the world and can even carry folk incense. How can the two be mentioned together? Your Highness, it's going to kill the old slave alive." The young man surnamed Gao, who was born in a noble family, had a stiff face. The girl seemed impatient and said sarcastically, "The frog at the bottom of the well is in a corner. Everyone likes to cherish himself. Take back the jade seal. I've always liked the saying that a gentleman doesn't take advantage of others." The girl acted briskly, turned and left. The young man in royal clothes was relieved. "Get up, Grandpa Wu. It's outrageous to kneel. The 12 great Da temples in the Xi dynasty used to kneel only to emperors. If they were seen by 6 speech officials or people from the etiquette department, it would be bad luck for both of us. All right. Thanks to the protection of my ancestors and the successful completion of this trip to the town, we don't have any complications. Leave here quickly and meet our own people outside after that. We should not take it lightly. You should know that the 6 pillar countries in the Dali dynasty, Yuan and Kao, although they're opposing camps, unfortunately, these 2 Dali pillars have a bitter feud with the Gao family of the Great Xi dynasty. Once Grandpa Wu has an accident here and his combat power is damaged, it is difficult for me to return to the Great Xi dynasty unharmed." The old man nodded and got up slowly. The old slave knows the importance and urgency of things. When the old man said the word urgent, the girl with hangings and hats had gone out for more than 20 steps. There was a breeze blowing around the young man in royal clothes, and the hair on his temples and the sleeves of his royal clothes were blown up. It turned out that the old man, who was famous in the Xianxia dynasty, didn't let go of the girl's mind at this time. He rushed away. The first 3 steps trampled heavily on the ground of the alley, and the sound was dull, more than a foot below the ground. At the 4th step, the old man jumped up high and hit the girl's back vest with a fist. The girl with the curtain had suddenly twisted her waist, took the tip of her left foot as the support point, and pulled out the scabbard with her right hand. There was a snow-white glow more dazzling than the sun in the alley. The tall old man rushed to the place with a crushing force and hit the blade with a fist. The back of his hand was only cut with blood by the sharp edge. After the old eunuch landed with his feet, he continued to rush forward and push the girl holding the knife backward. The old man then casually stretched out a palm. It seemed slow and calm, but in fact, lightning generally pushed the girl's forehead. Just as the old man was about to add gravity, he broke the head hidden under the curtain cap with one palm. He hurriedly moved his feet, moved his body 1 foot horizontally, snorted and looked down. A sharp weapon penetrated his right chest from his back. Dirty was the tip of the sword. The old man's face remained unchanged. His fingers closed together, clamped the tip of the sword and pushed back. Pushed the sharp flying sword that follows the girl's heart out of her chest. Blocked by the flying sword, the old eunuch not only failed to smash the girl's head with one palm, but the girl who fell into the alley took the opportunity to breathe. After getting up, she was as strong as a civet cat and soon disappeared from a fork in an alley. The boy's face was gloomy and terrible. His fists were clenched and his momentum was booming. With an angry look on her face, she said, "The royal horse warden printed the eunuch. Were you a Wuda temple? Why don't you listen to my hint and have to be so paranoid? You really think this town is the most invincible in the world? It's clear that we made a mistake first, and she hasn't been aggressive afterwards. She has been willing to calm down. Why do you want to be so vicious? It's too much deception." The old eunuch withdrew his sight from the direction of the girl fleeing the alley, turned and walked back. His waist was straight and became more and more majestic. The old man walked back slowly, step by step, like stepping heavily on his heart, feeling the suffocating power. The boy was oppressed by a slave and was full of anger. He stared with wide eyes, gnashing his teeth, and said, "It's a capital crime for you to supervise Wudia Temple." The old eunuch said indifferently, "Your Highness, death and life crimes need to be decided by your Majesty personally. In our view, Your Highness's safety is the top priority of the mountains and the most important position. In our view, the existence of the girl in the small town itself has become an urgent need. So we really want everything to be good. Only by killing her and her death can our family be at ease." Seeing the almost uncontrollable anger in the young man's eyes, the old eunuch sighed. "South Channel, I've worked in the imperial palace for more than 60 years. I've seen too many intrigues, bloody, non-bloody, and countless. I really don't have the slightest confidence in people's hearts. I can't solve more than 30 assassinations, large and small, just on the way of escorts. Your Highness, the insidious cunning of those assassin killers is beyond imagination, especially one. Some crazy dead men are unreasonable. Take the masked killer and the girl with the hat ... The young man in royal clothes stretched out his finger and pointed to the cold old eunuch, angrily accused. "Shut up, you old eunuch. I don't want to hear your nonsense. I'm only sure you ruined my careful solicitation. You're a blind man and know how talented and brilliant the girl who can control the flying sword is. Even among the practitioners on the mountain, she is also the top talent. Such a role, not to mention the great Shuai or Dolly, is the whole Dongbao Pingzhou. She is also a rare existence. I only need to train her for 10 years, up to 20 years, and she can become the most powerful assassin in the shadow behind me. If you're a land immortal and a master of martial arts, what is it? What happened? I am Gaosen, the future prince of the Xianxia dynasty. You're the master of the old eunuch Wu." It's strange that the old eunuch, who had experienced many vicissitudes of life, was not annoyed by the old eunuch one by one. Instead, his eyes became more and more gratified. When the young man finished venting, he finally stopped swearing, and the old man looked at the panting young man. Your Highness, although you may not know the treacherous world and sinister people because you have not experienced some things yourself, your Highness has done one thing very well and has the grace of your Majesty in those days. The atmosphere was awkward. After Gaosen calmed down, he should have realized that he was very wrong. Before he was appointed crown prince, he was so disrespectful to an old man who was an imperial horse supervisor, a eunuch and one of the 3 gatekeepers of the imperial palace of the Sui dynasty. Moreover, the key person was deeply trusted by his father, the emperor, and his mother. So the prince opened his mouth, seeing the powerful eunuch who was scolded as an old eunuch by himself. He smiled and said, Your Highness, remember, don't casually say sorry to your servant that it's not necessary. If you practice your identity in vain, your servant may not appreciate it. Even if you feel guilty, you should be deeply buried in your heart. You need to know that the emperor and king, known as the real dragon in the world, is the 95-year-old emperor with an implicit constitution. Double quotes. Gaosen said, Grandpa Wu, as I am now, it's too early to say this. The old eunuch suddenly tightened up and was like a great enemy. He pulled the young man in royal clothes behind him. The old man looked at the body of the masked killer. There was a slender middle-aged Confucian scholar who suddenly appeared at the end of the alley, walked slowly in, came near the killer's body, squatted down, took off his scarf, and saw only a strange face. No eyebrows, shaved nose, and engraved words on his face. There is no doubt that he was a criminal before his life. The Confucians were silent. Indeed, they had planned for a long time. I'm afraid this plan should start from the Confucian temple. Gao Shan's eyes were hot. He came out from behind the old eunuch, bent down and bowed down. No matter how he saluted first, he looked up and asked respectfully, Dare you ask, the Mr. Daoche of Xianxia Academy? The Confucian stood up and said to Gaosen, If you hadn't taken the lead to occupy a great opportunity, you two wouldn't be able to leave so easily today. Outsiders fight each other in the small town, according to the rules set by the first for saints. The punishment is not heavy, but it cannot be regarded as light, compared with indiscriminate killing of ordinary people in the small town. Ordinary people are bound to be expelled. There is an obvious loophole in the struggle between outsiders, so that people can make up for the lost shape. The reason why Gaosen and the 3 groups of people, including Gaosen, carry a servant, it is precisely for this reason that we have made the worst preparation, so as to push out as a scapegoat at the critical moment. Otherwise, just the quota will cost half of the savings of Emperor Gao's internal treasury of the Great Sui dynasty. At least it is a great country, and His Majesty's private has money, a whole half of the family foundation, and the amount of money is so large that it can be imagined. So who is willing to be such a wrong leader for no reason? In fact, the popular point is to spend money to eliminate disasters. It's just that the expenses here can't be described too much by emptying a golden mountain and a silver mountain. The so-called spending a lot of money in secular markets is a trifle in comparison. Gaosen, who was ordered to leave, continued to say to himself, Mr. Daoche, if you have a chance in the future, can you go to my Great Sui Academy to give lectures? I am willing to leave the national teacher empty for you. The old eunuch thought about it, but he still didn't stop the juvenile's blasphemy. If we can really persuade the scholar to give advice for Gao in the Great Sui dynasty, the emperor of the Great Sui dynasty will certainly be happy with Long Yan. The Confucian smiled and did not answer. The old eunuch was ruthless and decisive in dealing with a girl who met by chance. At this time, Mr. Daoche of Xianxia Academy showed another extreme attitude in the face of the Dinghai guard needle who sits here. He bowed his head and hugged his fist and said, Mr. Daoche, there are many complaints and hope for Hii Han that it's really a helpless move to attack a younger generation just now. I hope you can understand the hardship as a servant of the noble family. Che Jinchen waved his sleeve. Leave quickly. Gaozan and the old eunuch had to leave and just took a route for the retreat of the girl with the curtain and hat. The boy whispered, "Is she dead?" The old eunuch shook his head and said, "I'm sure she'll be dead soon. Flying the sword just makes her live a little longer, though it doesn't help." The boy hesitated for a moment and asked curiously, "When did Grandpa will see that she controls the flying sword? In fact, it is far from as relaxed and comfortable as it seems." The old man said, "Too much is better than too little. Her early wisdom has leaked." The boy was surprised and puzzled. The old eunuch led the boy out of the original alley and whispered, "Our family asked Your Highness a question. Your Highness has seen many rare objects of wealth and luxury in the world. But will you still be interested in ordinary porcelain in the town?" The boy patted his waist pocket and said with a smile, "Of course not. Only this jade seal with something similar to it can make me happy." The old eunuch nodded. "That's exactly the reason. When the girl killed with the sword, she was calm and calm. Just like ordinary people's eating, drinking and leisure. After realizing my true martial arts cultivation afterwards, she resolutely gave up the idea of fighting, especially for fear that I would see through her ferocity and weakness and deliberately take the initiative to provoke us. Her real intention is to find a platform for both sides. I'm afraid that her family has a murderous heart. I'd rather kill her by mistake than put her by mistake so she has to break the game. Of course, the facts have proved that she doesn't do well. But in the final analysis, it's not easy to have this idea at a young age. But the more so, once the tiger is released and allowed to thrive, the greater the threat to Your Highness in the future." The old man sighed. "Young girl, you are in high spirits in fight. We are not surprised if you kill someone with blood or die generously. But it is abnormal to die calmly after slight thinking, or if you can't afford to kill someone with half a snug leg ripples. It can even be said that this temperament can only be honed by experience. It has nothing to do with a person's talent or qualification. No matter how good or bad you practice, the reason why many talented people die early is that their temperament is too short and obvious. It is easy to do bad things in case of ups and downs." Gaozan lamented. "It's a pity anyway." The old eunuch joked, "Your Highness, if such a person's life and death, he will sigh once. Then when Your Highness really stands on the top of the mountain, he should be very busy." The boy smiled and said, "I don't believe it." The old eunuch suddenly said, "I don't know if it's an illusion. Our family feels that Mr. Jian, who has all-round cultivation, seems to have a big problem." The prince of the Sui dynasty said indifferently, "Anyway, as long as I could get this Longman seal, even if it was successful, I didn't think that this priceless seal had become a small addition to the big deal. So it's time for us to stop at once." As soon as I mentioned the golden carp, I couldn't help thinking of the straw sandal boy. The old eunuch smiled and said, "Your Highness is thinking of finding a chance to thank the young man in the future." The boy shook his head and said, "Where? I love that bag of copper money." The old man lost his smile. "Maybe there will be a thrifty emperor in the Sui dynasty." I secluded alley in the north-south direction. Only the sound of wheels. A young Taoist with a lotus crown on his head stopped doing business early today. He was pushing a cart. He wanted to clean up after returning to his residence and hurry back to his house. Who mixed in this mess? A slim man in black suddenly staggered out from the fork of the east-west alley. Finally, he leaned against the wall and moved slowly. With one hand, he crossed the curtain cap and exposed the tool, covered his mouth hard and pointed to the young Taoist with the other hand. The young Taoist quickly bowed his head and said silently, "You can see me, you can see me, the Supreme Lord is as urgent as a law. Forget it. It's the blessing of the Buddha and the manifestation of the Bodhisattva. When a Taoist comes to an end, he doesn't ask for thanking ancestors. Instead, he goes to ask for Buddha and Bodhisattva. It's really a little unreasonable." Sure enough, the Buddha and Bodhisattva seemed unwilling to pay attention to the disciples and grandchildren of other religions. The girl with the curtain hat, with the less strength coming out of nowhere, staggered towards the Taoist and fell heavily with a plop, but her left hand clung to the Taoist's ankle. The young Taoist held his head in his hands and looked sad and collapsed. It seems to be asking the sky. Isn't such a big cause and effect hitting me mean that I have engraved on my forehead the words "die with one heart"? I've been traveling all over the world, sleeping in the open air, trekking through mountains and rivers, and often being bitten by dogs in the street. How hard is it? I'm your mother's Big Shuai Gao surname and an old dog surnamed Wu. You wait for me. This account hasn't been 500 years, so I don't know. For the cultivation of Taoism is so shallow that I really can't bear any heavy burden. Double quotes. The incoherent young Taoist bowed his head and almost burst into tears. Little girl, would you be kind enough to let me go? I hope you find a place with beautiful mountains and rivers. Feng Shui is excellent, and I'm sure to be able to bless your children. No, the girl is still a big girl of yellow flowers, so double quotes. The girl has completely fainted. Seeing that there was no one around, the young Taoist squatted down and quietly broke off the girl's 5 fingers. Whoosh! The flying sword hovered in the air, and the tip of the sword was only 3 inches from the center of the young Taoist's eyebrows. The young Taoist priest quietly released his hand, looked pitiful, and said with awe-inspiring righteousness, "People are no plants and trees. How can they not have compassion? I've seen the beautiful moon in my life. Is it the kind of person who can save his life?" The young Taoist sat cross-legged, and his handsome face was about to wrinkle into a bowl. Where to send next is also trouble. The flying sword, which is 3 inches away from the center of Taoist eyebrows, moves forward 1 inch rapidly. The Taoist patiently explained, "If you want your master to survive, I still need a helper. By the way, you go to the old locust tree and poke a locust leaf. I'll hang this vitality for her first. Your master is special. I don't want to save people recklessly. At that time, I accidentally delayed her future of cultivation. This no cause and effect. It makes me want to die again. The flying sword seemed to hesitate, and the tip of the sword trembled slightly. The Taoist didn't have a good way. If you go early, your master can come back early from the gate of hell. If you go late, everyone will die together. The flying sword disappeared in the blink of an eye. The Taoist said angrily in a low voice, "Lan has an affectionate concubine who is interested in becoming a lover and a beautiful family member. It's good for you, Mr. Chen, to mess with the spectrum of Mandarin ducks, and don't wipe your ass even if you shit." The young Taoist held his skills in one hand and pinched his fingers in the other. "Let me calculate. Which family in the town will you send you to? You can survive and the other will not die. First, the Lu family. The Lu family can't. Just like the Zhao family. It's the Song family. The voice of the Taoist in the alley here hasn't fallen. In the courtyard of the Song family on Fulu Street, all the door guards posted on the large and small door leaves lost their look and were dim, and there were wisps of smoke invisible to the naked eye. Deep in the courtyard, a barefoot old man pushed the door out of the vicissitudes of life, stood in the yard, jumped his feet, and scolded angrily, "Which bastard is murdering my Song foundation? Stand up and fight." The young Taoist coughed and said to himself, "The Liu family in Fulu Street looks like a master who can carry things. Have a try." The plague of the family hall of the Liu family, which has been handed down for thousands of years, cracked with shocking cracks. An old woman with a thick voice knocked the ground heavily with a leading crutch. "Where is Sacred? Can you come out and see me?" The young Taoist pretended that nothing had happened. "That's the way family in Tawai Lane. It seems that your family is good and virtuous, and must be able to bear the cause and effect." Soon someone heard from the old man with secret skills and shouted at the school, "Jian, you don't care. If you can't or don't dare to do it, get out of here and give your place to Ruin Qian. Let him clean up this sneaky guy." "Where are you, Jian, venting your personal grievances?" A man was leading a man to dig a well by the stream south of the corridor bridge in the town. He stood straight behind him. His lips moved to the north. It was like a spring thunder rolling over Fulu Street and Tawai Lane. "Enough. Don't be disrespectful. And Ruin will never set foot in the affairs of the town before the spring equinox." For a time, the world was lonely and everything was silent. The culprit sitting next to the alley cart was grabbing a hand of the girl in black. and then threw the emerald lotus leaf brought by the flying sword on her bloody palm. After the saphura leaf touched the wound on the girl's palm, it dissipated in an instant like the melting of ice and snow. The young Taoist said with emotion. Every time I see this situation, I have to be grateful for the creation of heaven and earth. After brewing for a long time, the Taoist couldn't come up with his unsatisfactory words. The young Taoist finally bowed his head and looked at the young girl with a slight overflow of air. Some were in trouble. Since you're more involved than I thought, you can only go against it. There were 600 families in the town, which are intertwined and have been exposed to the atmosphere of this secret place from generation to generation. It's easy for me to find the guy with lingering gas, but it's more difficult to find the poor man than going to heaven. It's like finding a senior official in the court hall. It's easy to find the beggar. How can I find it? The young Taoist said. I really found such a poor bastard. He was not surprised at all. Instead, he closed his eyes and asked himself. The young Taoist sighed. Anyway, it depends on how you choose. I will never insist. If you don't want to, I'll bear the cause and effect by myself. Finally, he learned from the monk to put his hands together. Blessed by the Buddha, the Bodhisattva shows his spirit. We must let the poor man get through this disaster. In the mud bottle lane, the young passerby bent over and pushed a two-wheeled vehicle to a courtyard gate. After knocking on the door, he asked, Is Chen Ping in there? On the cart, in the corner gap, there was a long sword with a snow-white scabbard. The flying sword in the scabbard was sick. As if it was disgusting that the young Taoist had found such a broken settlement. The young Taoist had thought up a lot of words to deal with the whole problem of the straw sandal boy. It was just unexpected. The gate of the courtyard opened quickly. It was obvious that the boy in the bad alley skipped that link directly. Mudbottle Lane is one of the most narrow lanes in the town. The Taoist's wheeled wooden cart can't be placed outside to block the road. Fortunately, Chen Ping looks skinny and doesn't have a few kilograms of strength. In fact, his physical strength is not small. It doesn't take much effort to help a young Taoist get the rather heavy cart into the yard together. From beginning to end, the young man didn't say anything, which made the young Taoist a little embarrassed after closing the door. It was like a person who had the cheek to come to the door to borrow money. The host had good tea, wine and meat, and was hospitable. It would be more and more difficult for the guest to talk if he had a little conscience. The young Taoist thought it would be embarrassing to be horizontal or vertical. He might as well have a good time. He opened the cotton mattress covered on the cart and revealed a girl in black with a cold body on her side. The slanting, the not falling curtain and had still stubbornly covered the master's face. For some reason, when he opened the thin quilt, there was a smell of black coming to his face. At this time, Chen Ping found that she was dressed in black, with blood seeping out faintly. Chen Ping didn't think of a small quilt. Why could he completely hide the strong smell? The boy just stepped back and asked, Taoist priest, what are you going to do? The young Taoist said, Help. She was seriously injured, and no one in the town was willing to save her. No wonder they cleaned the snow in front of the door. So I thought about it. I think you might be an exception. Chen Ping hit the point and asked, How did she get hurt? The Taoist's face is not red and his heart does not jump. When I was driving past the archway just now, I saw this young woman from a foreign country who said that she was going to make a rubbing of the Black Angry bullfight. She took a rubbing bag, brush and other things and climbed up. As for the rubbing, how to say, it was such a coping hook. It was generally supported by the scholar when he was full. I couldn't understand it for a while. Anyway, the little scholar didn't understand after climbing up. The girl bent down and sat on the beam. She was so frightened that she had to stop and remind her to be careful from time to time. She was still too absorbed in the end. She was cold and fell on the ground. The ground on the other side of the memorial archway is not as hard as your clay bottle lane. It's good. I must have hurt all my internal organs and intestines. I'm a monk. I must be compassionate. Right? Every family hates her blood all the way. It's not long after the new year. It's too unlucky. I'm not willing to carry her into the house. I know it's human nature. So I can't find you here. It's hard to say, if even you don't want to take her in. I'm not an immortal who can pull people from the gate of hell. I can only wait for the girl to swallow her last breath, and then try my best to find the place. Dig a pit and erect a monument. The Taoist deliberately spoke very fast and couldn't pronounce clearly. Obviously, he wanted to confuse the youth in circles and muddle through it first. Everything is difficult at the beginning. But as long as he starts at the beginning, he can take one step at a time. There is no unique road for people. There is always a time when there are willows and flowers. Chen Ping and his eyes were complex. He glanced at the hopeful young Taoist and the dead girl in black. After a battle between heaven and man, he nodded and said, "How can we save it?" The young Taoist suddenly became a leader. "Come on. With you." Chen Ping and his words. "Even if it's half." Although she looks terrible, it feels like Lord Jian has ticked off his name in the book of life and death. In fact, it's not as exaggerated as you think. Of course, what I just said is true. It involves all kinds of mysterious mechanisms. For example, this girl has a strong desire to survive. In addition, she seems to have some family members that can protect her vital mind and room. And that Terran is a very interesting place. There are a lot of strange things. It's very helpful to eat or catch them. The young Taoist revived and realized that he had revealed a lot of secrets. He smiled and said, "You can't understand anyway, can you?" The boy said seriously, "I don't understand, but most of them remember." The young Taoist asked tentatively, "So when you hear the knocking voice in the room, you know it's the fortune teller who runs the store?" Chen Ping hesitated and said, "Yes." The young Taoist asked curiously, "You have a good memory. How good is it?" The young man looked at the dying girl in black. The young Taoist smiled and explained, "She is now in a mysterious state. She can't move her body at all. It's best to wait a moment." Chen Ping was skeptical. "I can remember things more easily than listening to others." The young Taoist asked, "For example?" Chen Ping thought, "For example, at the head of our dragon kill, Master Yao. His jump knife technology is the most powerful among all the teachers in the town. In fact, I can remember all the details once I read it, The young Taoist answered the topic with a smile. "But your hands and feet can't keep up, can't you?" Chen Ping his eyes lit up and nodded hard. The young Taoist smiled knowingly. "Have you ever thought about where old man Yao's unique skill is really powerful?" Chen Ping his face was dark. "I couldn't figure it out before." Later, Liu Xianxia told me that old man Yao said that if you want to do the best in the skill of jump knife, you must be calm, not just steady. After hearing these words, I understood a little. I was too worried before. The more anxious I was, the more messy my hands were, and the more chaotic I was, the more likely I was to make mistakes. Once I made mistakes, I knew clearly where I didn't do like old man Yao. Then I was even more anxious. So I was always the worst at drawing billet at Long Yao. The young Taoist said calmly, "There is an old saying that the master leads you into the door to practice in a person. But the people who are masters don't want to lead you into the door at all. How do you practice?" Chen Ping shook his head and said, "I'm stupid. I can't compare with Liu Xianxia. Even an ordinary apprentice. It's not surprising that old man Yang doesn't see me." The young Taoist suddenly smiled and said, "Chen Ping, do you know how difficult it is to understand the word hard stability? It's hard to understand. You can't belittle yourself." Chen Ping still shook his head and said, "It's like catching fish in a stream. I stand where the water depth is less than knee-deep and bend over to catch fish. Some people are good at water. They plunge into a big pit and hold their breath for a long time to catch fish. That's also catching fish. The Tao is long, but the two are different. Right?" The young Taoist laughed and said, "We can save people." Chen Ping was stunned, and the young Taoist was also stunned. "Why are you stunned?" "Hold the girl to the bed in the house." Chen Ping didn't move. "Then what?" The Taoist said, "Of course, first help the girl change into clean clothes, and then go to the medicine shop to catch some herbs to replenish Qi and nourish Yuan. At that time, I need to go out of the mountain in person and show my skills." Chen Ping asked with a dark face, "Will I be killed by her when the girl wakes up?" The young Taoist cut the nail and cut the railway. "No. You are her life-saving benefactor. How could there be such an ungrateful person in the world? Chen Ping'an remained silent. The Taoist coughed and his momentum plummeted. Probably not. Chen Ping'an sighed and asked tentatively. There is a girl named Zhigui next door. Don't let her do these things. The young Taoist reluctantly said. No. The crux of the problem is here. Chen Ping'an didn't insist either. He squatted on the ground and scratched his head with both hands. The young Taoist suddenly asked, Is there anything you want to ask? If you ask, I may not be able to solve all my doubts. But try to choose some that can be answered. Chen Ping'an sighed, got up and said, Save people first. The young Taoist smiled. Good. He quietly brushed his sleeve and pressed the flying sword in the scabbard. Chen Ping'an picked up the girl and walked into the house. He gently put her on the wooden bed with bedding. The wooden bed that had previously been collapsed by Liu Xianxia was just repaired. A bench was placed under the bed. The young Taoist stepped into the threshold behind him and looked around. His family was in vain, but so that as soon as the young Taoist patted his head, he went out to get paper and pen and prepared to write a prescription for the young man to fill the medicine. After returning to the house, the young Taoist shook his head and deliberately didn't look at the wooden bed. He thought that the poor boy was sure to go away. The boy sitting on the edge of the bed had taken off the girl in black and exposed her hat, revealing a pale face covered with blood. The so-called 7 orifices bleeding is probably the picture under the boy's eyelids. The boy quickly got up, took a stool from the table and put it beside the bed, and then quickly ran to a corner of the wall. There was a small wooden frame with pots and pans neatly placed. Next to the wooden frame, there was a small water tank covered with wood to protect mosquitoes and flies. The water tank was full of well water from the iron log well in Xinhua Lane. The boy took a wooden basin and gourd ladle and squatted next to the water tank. Scoop out clean water from the pottery jar and quickly pour it into the wooden basin. Then put a piece of clean cotton cloth on the edge of the basin. Enter to the bedside, put it on the stool, and start to wipe the blood stain for the girl who took off the curtain cap. The young Taoist turned his head and raised a piece of paper in his hand. There is a small medicine shop on Fulu Street. Take this prescription to get the medicine. The young man wondered. Didn't the Taoist priest say it before? The young Taoist looked confused and said with a blink, Yes. I want you to be careful when you fill the medicine. Don't make the high-profile publicity, so as not to make the city full of wind and rain and damage the girl's reputation. Chen Ping'an gave a cry. While cleaning the cotton cloth, he asked, Does the Taoist priest have money for medicine? The young Taoist suddenly became nervous. Didn't you? Chen Ping'an put the wooden basin on the table and pressed a gold coin that he did not know from where he was to put it on the table. I have a copper coin with you, said Da Chang. As for how to change it, you has the final say. The young Taoist thought for a moment. This copper coin on the table is enough to buy the things on the prescription. I'll go and get the money for you. Soon the Taoist priest took back a bag of ordinary copper money and a few pieces of silver and gave it to Chen Ping'an. Chen Ping'an told him, I'll pour this basin of water later. The Taoist priest doesn't need help. Song Jixen, who lives next door, likes new things. Don't let him see it. It's no good. The young Taoist said solemnly. Chen Ping'an, don't you have any questions you want to ask? Chen Ping'an stood where he was, roughly weighed the copper coins and silver coins, carefully put them away, and indicated with his eyes to go out to speak. After they walked out of the threshold, the straw sandal boy raised his head and said slowly, I know you are not ordinary people. Old man Yao said when he was drunk that our town is unusual. Everywhere is strange and everyone is strange. But where is strange? Old man Yao can't say anything. Of course, I don't understand that Gukan said that the storyteller was born this time that an ordinary big white bowl can pour out a large jar of water. Although Gukan is very annoying, but in this matter, I know he didn't like that. It's like ... The teenager paused and continued. Just like a tall woman today, in the alley outside the door. She flicked my forehead with her finger and patted my heart with her palm. Finally, she said I was going to die soon. I know what she said is true. The young Taoist priest's face was heavy. Chen Ping'an finally said, The Taoist priest said that the rune paper you wrote could bring good luck to my parents after burning that in fight. I believe the Taoist priest. So the Taoist priest came to the door and asked me to save people. I didn't say anything just now, but I hope the Taoist priest promised me one thing. If he promised, the Taoist priest doesn't care what he wants me to do next. If the Taoist priest doesn't promise, he will catch the prescription this time and help the Taoist priest after the long decoction. I'll drive people away. The Taoist asked, "What conditions are you talking about?" The young man, who gave the impression that he had always been very stable and sophisticated, was a little nervous and replied, "My parents died early at that time. I was very young. I don't know why. I remember a lot of things when I was a child. It was my parents' appearance, which was always vague and unclear. Later, I ate vegetarian for a period of time and lived by my neighbors. Once I had no opinion. I heard people say that I was born on the 5th day of May. Listen to their tone. I shouldn't want an auspicious day. Someone next door said it more directly and frankly. Double quotes. The young man kept going around the corner and stopped. Finally, he went straight to the thing, lowered his head, and said in a dull tone, after helping the Taoist priest save people, if I suddenly die one day, can the Taoist priest help me reincarnate in my next life and be my parents' children?" The young Taoist was silent. Chen Ping and grinned and scratched his head. "No. Forget it. Indeed. There is no such thing in the world. Is it me who has grown up?" The Taoist smiled bitterly and said, "What about that girl?" Chen Ping and suddenly turned around, turned his back to the Taoist, raised his fist and waved it. For the first time, he joked, "She's so handsome. If she doesn't save, she's a fool." The young Taoist looked at the straw sandal boy, who pretended to be relaxed and pushed the door to leave. The boy walking in the mud puddle lane seemed to think of someone and burst into tears.